only just begun. Alrighty, everyone. Fuck, that's not supposed to happen. Take two. I wonder what I'm gonna learn today. Maybe I should practice the mantle jumps. Fuck.
Oh my god, that's like perfect.
Let's see what training bullshit there is. This is nothing what I care about.
The most powerful, impactful, and essential technique to having godlike aim has been right in front of our eyes all along. The problem is, with more screen time than ever increasing visual and audio effects, mechanical demands, strategy and multiplayer communication.
Oh, bogey spotted.
What's that?
Mobilizing.
Oh fuck, I have more respect
We've
for
lost
this
sight
guy
of the
than
most fundamental
any
aiming
other.
technique of them all.
Holy
You need to be focusing on your target, not just looking at it. And believe me, there is a massive difference between the two, and it's not quite as easy as it may seem. True focus makes you feel like you're playing in slow motion, like you've got a secret bullet time ability you can just switch on. Enemies will appear slower, you'll feel like a psychic knowing exactly where they're moving by absorbing and synthesizing visual cues, and ultimately, you will feel in control of your aim. Aiming stops being all about moving your crosshair to the target, but rather pulling your target to the center of your screen. You may think I'm playing this up a bit, but I can honestly say this is my most recommended tip I give to anyone struggling with their aim. And personally, anytime I'm having trouble with my own aim, this is the first thing I address. So many of my perceived problems with aim can simply vanish with this reminder. Let's start by defining the difference between focusing and looking at something. I have a few examples that I like to use. First is the fan. If you look at it, you can see it spinning and the blades are a blur. But if you focus on a single blade, you can follow it around. Notice how your perspective changes as you lock onto it. What was previously a blur becomes a well-defined shape. From here, maintain your focus when following it around, but start to explore with your peripheral vision. Note the position of the other blades and the beam crossing the ceiling, all while staying focused on one blade. Next, focus on the center of the fan, and from here, using your peripheral vision, track the rotation of the blades. The point of that little exercise is to demonstrate the shift between simply looking at something and focusing on it. Notice all the extra information we can gather when doing it. It also shows us that focus isn't tunnel vision. You're not having to sacrifice awareness to aim at your target. You can still acknowledge and even track the environment around you without shifting your focus away. This will come into play again a little later with some neat tricks I'll show you for flick shots. If that example didn't quite work for you, or you'd just like to experiment a little more, try looking at your screen while waving a hand in front of you. If you're looking at the screen, your hand will be a blur, but you can then shift your gaze and focus on the hand, completely changing your perspective and putting the screen out of focus. So long as it's not making you sick, you can try quickly shifting back and forth between the screen and your hand. Now that we've established the difference, you may be thinking that surely you're already focusing in-game. It's so obvious. Unfortunately, that's where autopilot and frankly sensory overload comes in. It is so incredibly easy to slip into autopilot when playing, and what I mean by that is just going through the motions. You may still be communicating, positioning, and generally playing well, but you're playing off your accumulated knowledge and instinct. Your mind isn't really in it and fully engaged. And that's totally fair. It takes a lot of energy to be fully present, especially if you're playing for prolonged multi-hour sessions. This goes double for streamers. You may hear a common sentiment that streamers say they play much better off stream, and quite simply, they have far more energy and attention to direct toward the game when they're not managing chat, worrying about their performance or what they're saying. When I mention sensory overload, it's not quite that dramatic, and I don't want to diminish what it actually means. But modern games in particular have such an abundance of sounds, visuals, players talking, mechanical and strategic demands that it's no wonder that focus isn't happening automatically. Fortunately, while this makes focusing harder to do naturally, focusing itself is actually a great tool for ordering the chaos. With autopilot, the useful information gets lost in the noise, but with focus, we absorb what we need to and shut out the irrelevant bloat. So how do we apply this in-game? If you just jump right in, you may find that bizarrely you can't make it happen. Which is odd because you literally just have to use your eyes to focus. It's easy enough to do looking at the fan or your hand, so what gives? The most common struggle I see people having with this is being overwhelmed during fights. My favorite fix is to play with game sound completely muted. No Spotify, Discord or anything, playing in silence. If your game of choice has a casual mode, deathmatch, that sort of thing, this would be the place to do it. Sound is important, so you'll need to accept that you'll probably die a bunch of times to things you could have avoided. The point of this is to remove a huge number of auditory distractions so you can now focus on focusing. This should allow you to experience what true focus feels like during a fight in an FPS game. When you know what it feels like and what to expect, you can turn your sound back on and try again. If you play aim trainers, a great method to practice this in a more controlled environment with fewer variables is by playing close to mid fast strafe style scenarios. Without focus, they will feel frustratingly erratic. Focus won't give you 100% accuracy, but the fast strafes suddenly feel much more manageable. In Kovacs, I recommend trying the robot variations that have a humanoid target, which provides more features to focus on and lets you get a feel for what absorbing visual cues is like. In-game, focusing lets you absorb information like a target's body position, angle, where their legs are facing, what objects or walls are around them, all of which let you know what their next moves are most likely to be. Instead of reactively flicking your crosshair back and forth, you can, for example, acknowledge that they've just changed direction in their strafe and will move in one direction for the next few moments, netting you some predictable and easier shots. When you get good enough at it, you can determine the width of someone's AD strafe after the first left and right movement. The vast majority of players will AD strafe at the same cadence of button presses. It's really hard to desync them without some serious conscious effort. This lets you track them predictively after this point, rather than having to wait on your reaction time to tell you that they've changed direction. Knowing what focus feels like is only half the battle. We still need to remind ourselves to do it. These are my two favorite techniques for keeping it top of mind, and both of them use the same strategy of piggybacking this idea onto an already established behavior. First, anytime I have negative thoughts about my aim, like wondering why I missed some easy shots or maybe my sense doesn't feel right, I remind myself to focus. Second, every time I manually reload, I remind myself to focus. Before long, these become habits. It's really difficult to summon the reminder to focus out of thin air, especially when playing these chaotic modern shooters. By attaching this reminder to other behaviors, you can automatically summon the thought in a non-intrusive way, keeping it top of mind without wasting energy or getting distracted. Generally speaking, the easiest way to go about this is to always focus on your target, not your crosshair or anything else. But if you're feeling a little adventurous, there are a few exceptions that can make your flick shots easier to land in certain situations. First is when you're holding an angle and need to react quickly. In this situation, I get caught out when scanning, I'm low health and I know exactly where they are. Ideally, my crosshair would have been around the edge, but I didn't have time to move it, and by leaving it exactly where it landed, I have a moment to acknowledge where it is and how far I'm likely going to need to aim. My eyes are focused on the edge here because I don't know if he'll be able to peek his head up here or whether he'll have to jump to get line of sight on me. With my eyes focused on this spot, the Pathfinder jumps up and I don't have time to move my eyes to the head. So instead, I keep my eyes fixed to that same spot and use my peripheral vision to follow his movement. Much like in the fan example where we tracked the other blades while still focusing on the original one. This lets me flick up to the head for a clutch headshot. To summarize that one, if you're holding an angle and need to react quickly, maintain your focus on one spot and track them with your peripheral vision instead. The second example is when you need to flick a long distance. This won't happen all too often, and usually it will happen when you're scanning your eyes around the environment and your gaze lands between your crosshair and the enemy. This clip was from a flickshot challenge I did, so I don't recommend aiming like this normally, though it does provide a good example. With the large distance between my crosshair and the target, if I were to focus on the target, I lose track of where my crosshair is, making the shot unreliable as I don't really have a good sense of how far to flick. So instead, I focus on a spot in between the two, probably a little closer to the target as that's more important. While I'm focusing on this bit of nothingness in between, I can use my peripheral vision to determine my crosshair position and the position of my target, letting me perform a more well-informed and reliable flick shot. If you find yourself getting confused about when to focus on the target or when to choose a certain spot, just go for the target. The vast majority of the time it's the correct decision. As you get more comfortable, these variations will come to you naturally anyway without needing to summon up the decision between the two. For such a simple topic on the surface, there is a surprising amount of nuance, and the importance of doing this for improving your aiming performance cannot be understated. For that reason, please leave any questions or comments you may have down below and I'll do my best to answer them. If you would like to see the rest of the Forbidden Flickshots challenge, you can check out the full video right here. Thanks so much for watching, be sure to subscribe for more content like this, and I'll catch you in the next one. Shroud has a mystifying mastery over his aim and his fast and flashy playstyle. Let's take a deep dive into his setup, settings, and techniques to see just how the man does it, and to see what we can learn from Shroud to improve our own aim and gameplay. Let's start with his mouse sensitivity. Here is a list of his most recent settings in a variety of FPS games. For reference, centimeters per 360 is how much real-life distance you move your mouse to perform a complete rotation in-game. This is handy for comparing sensitivities between games. Something that immediately sticks out here are the repeated entries of 41 centimeters. Now, this is quite interesting because Shroud never bothers with converting sensitivities between games. He just feels it out and iterates as he plays. This shows us an uncanny ability to quickly find a sensitivity that feels instinctive and effective. The games listed at 41 centimeters are all played on a very similar field of view, with 103, 103, and 100 horizontal field of view respectively. It is important to note here that identical sensitivities will actually feel faster or slower if the fields of view between the two games are different. This is because the pixels per degree of movement aren't the same. For example, if I were to use the same sensitivity for hipfire and for a 10x scope, the scope will feel ridiculously fast. This is why ADS and scopes have a sensitivity multiplier. With ours set to 1, Apex uses something called focal length scaling to make the 10x scope feel the same as hipfire, despite the centimeters per 360 being a whopping 524. As we would expect, the games Shroud plays on a higher field of view like Apex Legends and Rainbow Six Siege feature higher sensitivities. Despite the number being different, they will actually feel very similar to his 41 centimeters. We can see that he plays Fortnite on his highest sensitivity of 28, but considering the third person camera and the close quarters aiming and building, this isn't too surprising. Certain games will simply play better on certain sensitivity ranges. He does play Tarkov on 33 centimeters while having a similar field of view to his 41 centimeter games. I suspect this is due to the turn speed modifiers on gear slowing down your mouse sensitivity, so his sense may actually be set higher to compensate for this. Generally speaking, Shroud tends to play on mid to low mouse sensitivity. Considering his prowess in any FPS game, this doesn't come as a surprise. In fact, this is about as standard as your sensitivity can get. It's low enough to get the benefits of enhanced precision, while still maintaining enough mobility and speed to navigate your environment, switch targets, and track moving enemies. This poll was run a few years ago by a user on mousesensitivity.com, and this shows that Shroud sits almost exactly in the center of the distribution. So, to quickly summarize, Shroud has an incredibly precise ability to find his best sensitivity in any game quickly and through feel alone, no conversions necessary. And his mouse sensitivity is very standard among high-level FPS players, featuring a great balance of precision and speed. Shroud consistently pulls off insanely fast and flashy plays. Does he have inhuman reaction time, or is this something anyone can do? Let's take a look. In this clip, it takes Shroud only 10 frames at 60 FPS from first seeing the enemy to beginning to move his crosshair over toward him. This is equal to 166 ms. And here again, it takes Shroud only 10 frames at 60 FPS to move his crosshair after seeing the enemy appear on screen. For a quick reference, using the same method, here is TenZ also taking 10 frames to react to his target. Considering the average reaction time is around 200 to 250 ms, this does show that Shroud is exceptional in this regard. While it would be nice if we could all have reaction times this fast, it pales in significance to the extremely common mistake players make with hesitation and confirmation. A player like Shroud shoots first and asks questions later. When reacting to visual stimulus, it only takes him around 160 ms. He doesn't flick to an enemy and then check where his crosshair landed before firing or adjusting, he just flicks and shoots. Every time you acknowledge new visual information, that has cost you a delay equal to your reaction time. Say your reaction time is 200 ms, and you flick to a new enemy, but then you check where your crosshair landed before firing, you've just spent another 200 ms. Shroud has mastered his focused and aggressive playstyle, effectively utilizing his great reaction times and absence of hesitation to stay a step ahead of his opponents, and to clutch out situations that he really shouldn't win. Shroud plays with a unique twist on a popular mouse grip used by competitive aimers. The primary contact points are each fingertip angled toward the mouse, with a degree of pressure applied to the mouse pulling it back into the palm. The knuckles of the thumb, pinky, and ring finger are also in contact with the mouse. This grip works so well because it allows your fingers, wrist, and arm to work together synergistically for a clean aiming action. The arm gets your hand to the area where it needs to be to start aiming, and the wrist handles the bulk of flicking and tracking, and the fingertips can handle small aiming movements and adjustments. On the other hand, grips like palm grip can rely too heavily on the arm and wrist, wasting the potential of the fingers. While fingertip sacrifices control over the mouse by not having it secured in the hand, and relies too heavily on the fingers, it can also restrict you to using higher sensitivities. Shroud's unique twist is that he tends to have his pinky finger bent at the knuckle, pointing straight down into the mousepad. What this does is provide an extremely secure seating of the mouse within the hand, but it does sacrifice some micro adjustments of the pinky and the ring finger, and in a sense, it creates a wall for the thumb to push and manipulate the mouse against instead. This unique approach likely comes down to a combination of his own physiology and the mouse shape he tends to use.
I can't show you how to grip your mouse. Just pick it up, hold it, and that's how you hold your mouse. Whatever feels natural.
In typical Shroud fashion, he just does what feels right, so I wouldn't get too caught up in trying to exactly mimic his grip. For example, to copy his pinky movement, it takes me a lot of effort and causes discomfort in my wrist, so I stick to a more traditional approach that is comfortable for me. Shroud uses the G303 Shroud Edition, a modernized version of the G303 with slight changes to make it a better fit for his mouse grip and aiming style. This odd mouse shape is great for flicking and micro adjusting with claw style grips. This largely comes down to the negative camber that allows your thumb, pinky, and ring finger to push into the mouse and pull it toward the palm. Other popular mice have mostly straight sides or even a positive camber in the top half that make pulling into the palm difficult. The G303 allows for a more natural grip where the pinky sits further out than the ring finger. For example, if I close my hand as if I were gripping something, the pinky sits out wider than the ring finger. This does suit the G303, but with your typical lightweight ambidextrous mouse, you have to squeeze in that pinky to make contact. Having your mouse well seated in your hand makes flick shots and large mousepad swipes more comfortable, faster, and ultimately more accurate. This is an important component of Shroud's flicking accuracy and speed. The negative camber allows for excellent fingertip manipulation of the mouse, which plays a part in Shroud's headshot consistency. Being able to easily get your crosshair on center of mass can make you a great aimer, but to be world class, you need to be able to intentionally hit headshots. The G303 Shroud Edition's design makes small adjustments like moving your crosshair from shoulder or chest to the head, mid-fight or mid-tracking, much easier. All of this being said, this doesn't mean that other mice are bad, but if pinky positioning has never felt right, or the mouse just doesn't quite feel secure in your hand, then the G303 Shroud Edition may be a good, albeit expensive option for you. I have mained the G303 Shroud Edition for almost a year now, and if you're wondering what the green patch is for, it's to pad out the width of the mouse for my larger hands. If you are interested in this mouse, or any other gear that Shroud uses, I have affiliate links to them posted in the description if you'd like to help support the channel. Shroud uses the Logitech G840 Shroud Edition mousepad. Due to his sponsorships, he won't be out there experimenting with all the modern new mousepads, so we can't really say if the G840 is the best fit for him or not. With that being said, as far as cloth mousepads go, the G840 has good stopping power and a controlled glide, which is a great fit for Shroud's flick-heavy aiming style. But it does have one huge caveat. It only performs this well at around 55% or lower humidity. Once the humidity starts to climb, any clamminess or moisture on your hands will cause your skin to start sticking and skidding along the mousepad. This introduces frustrating inconsistencies into your aiming. Now, while Shroud does live in a humid climate, it's likely that his room is climate controlled through air conditioning, which can easily drop a room's humidity by 30% or more. The mousepad is also notorious for collecting dirt, grime, skin, dust, and so on, which detracts from the usual glide. But considering this is Shroud, he's simply in a position where he can replace his mousepad whenever this becomes a problem. Okay, so I'm going to analyze some of Shroud's gameplay to see what we can find. I chose this Battlefield 5 map, the most powerful. Now that we've established the difference, you may be thinking that surely you're already focusing in-game. It's so obvious. Unfortunately, that's where autopilot and frankly sensory overload comes in. It is so incredibly easy to slip into autopilot when playing, and what I mean by that is just going through the motions. You may still be communicating, positioning, and generally playing well, but you're playing off your accumulated knowledge and instinct. Your mind isn't really in it and fully engaged. And that's totally fair. It takes a lot of energy to be fully present, especially if you're playing for prolonged multi-hour sessions. This goes double for streamers. You may hear a common sentiment that streamers say they play much better off stream, and quite simply, they have far more energy and attention to direct toward the game when they're not managing chat, worrying about their performance or what they're saying. When I mention sensory overload, it's not quite that dramatic, and I don't want to diminish what it actually means. But modern games in particular have such an abundance of sounds, visuals, players talking, mechanical and strategic demands that it's no wonder that focus isn't happening automatically. Fortunately, while this makes focusing harder to do naturally, focusing itself is actually a great tool for ordering the chaos. With autopilot, the useful information gets lost in the noise, but with focus, we absorb what we need to and shut out the irrelevant bloat. So how do we apply this in-game? If you just jump right in, you may find that bizarrely you can't make it happen, which is odd because you literally just have to use your eyes to focus. It's easy enough to do looking at the fan or your hand, so what gives? The most common struggle I see people having with this is being overwhelmed during fights. My favorite fix is to play with game sound completely muted. No Spotify, Discord or anything, playing in silence. If your game of choice has a casual mode, deathmatch, that sort of thing, this would be the place to do it. Sound is important, so you'll need to accept that you'll probably die a bunch of times to things you could have avoided. The point of this is to remove a huge number of auditory distractions so you can now focus on focusing. This should allow you to experience what true focus feels like during a fight in an FPS game. When you know what it feels like and what to expect, you can turn your sound back on and try again. If you play aim trainers, a great method to practice this in a more controlled environment with fewer variables is by playing close to
balls. Fucking rats. How do you find that fun?
To mid-fast strafe style scenarios. Without focus, they will feel frustratingly erratic. Focus won't give you 100% accuracy, but the fast strafes suddenly feel much more manageable. In Kovacs, I recommend trying the robot variations that have a humanoid target, which provides more features to focus on and lets you get a feel for what absorbing visual cues is like. In-game, focusing lets you absorb information like a target's body position, angle, where their legs are facing, what objects or walls are around them, all of which let you know what their next moves are most likely to be. Instead of reactively flicking your crosshair back and forth, you can, for example, acknowledge that they've just changed direction in their strafe and will move in one direction for the next few moments, netting you some predictable and easier shots. When you get good enough at it, you can determine the width of someone's AD
Too late, man.